Hello and welcome back. In this video, we will see the scope of variable. What is scope? How do we define scope? Let's see these terms in Python. I go to Jupyter Lab and let me define the scope. Scope is the region where the variables exist. So variables exist in scopes. We call the living region, the existence region of the variables, we call it as scope. We will see how to define scopes, what scope mean in Python. Scope is defined, is determined by indentation in Python. When you do an indent, you create scope for that whatever clause is. If it's a function, you start function scope. If it's an if statement, you start if statements scope. We will see if statements later on. Okay, let's see the function scope. I will make this code. Let's see the function scope in an example. Function scope. I will define a function and I will name it as scope fn, scope function, let's say, and it will not take any parameters, and I will create a variable here as scope var, and I will assign 100 to it. Now I will print scope var, scope variable. Okay, that's my function. Now I will call the function. Scope function. If I call it, it will print 100. That's what we know so far. So now what I will try to do is I want to reach this variable. I want to print directly scope variable, which was defined inside the function, scope. Okay, now I want to try to reach the variable inside the function. Let's see what happens. Now it says that scope var is not defined, but we defined it where in the function scope. So in outside the function scope, over the function scope, you cannot reach this variable because it's in another scope. So this is how scope works in Python. Let's see other examples. Let's say in here I want to do another calculation. Let's say s2 is a new variable. This is scope var times 2, which is perfectly fine. S2, I will print S2 also. As you see, it prints this one also. Since I'm in the scope of function, I can use any variable inside this scope. Outside the scope, I cannot reach the variable. Later on, we will define functions inside functions. I will define a function here later on. Inside this function, also we can use this scope variable. We will see it later. Okay, so the inner scope we can use it here, but in the outer scope we cannot. Okay, in the global scope we cannot. Where is global scope? Global scope is the very first place where we write our code. The first line which starts here. No indent means global scope. Here is global scope. Okay, now let's see. We have two variables in the global scope. Global scope, it's exactly where we are currently. We will define two variables here. First is the short. Again, the variable name is short and the value is 40, let's say, and long, the variable value is 60, let's say. Okay, now I have defined this variables. I can reach them everywhere in this function, in this notebook, because they are in global scope. They are at the very top, defined at the very top, and in the global scope. Now inside another function, now I will define a function to use these two variables, to use global scope variables, which you will see. Now let's define it, def, and let's name it as perimeter, and it will not take any arguments because it will directly access these two variables which we define in the scope, in the global scope. So it will create an area of rectangle, and it will use short times long, and it will print the area of rectangle. Okay, now I define the function. Now I will run. As you see, I run the function and it works perfectly fine because the function reached the global scope. It can, because the global scope is its superset. Every function or every scope can access its supersets variable, as it's in our case. Okay, so what if we want to change the global variables inside the scope? Let me show you this. What if I will copy this function again? Now I will try to change the global variables inside my function. Let's name it as change globals. I already know that I have two variables in the global scope, which is short and the other one is long. I want to change short as 50, okay, as 50, and I want to print short. Now listen, watch carefully please. Now I will run this and I will call this function, okay, and it assigns short 50 and print short. Now I will print global short again, global short variable again. Let's see, in the global scope we have a variable named short. Yes, I assigned it inside the function, but now I want to print it. As you see, it's still the old value. It didn't change. Even if I assign a new value inside the function, the global variable didn't change. Okay, so rule of thumb is, if you want to change a global variable, you have to use global keyword. This is the rule of thumb. Okay, this should be marked down. Now we will use global keyword and we will change the global variable. I will copy this one and come here, try change global variables, but this time with global keyword. Let's see how it goes. Now I want to use global short, so I say global and short, which means for Python, which means inside this scope, inside this function scopes, I will, whenever I change short, I mean global short. So Python will directly change global if you assign. And let's say here we assign 5000. Let's say now if I print this, if I call this function, it will print 5000 first. Then if I call the global variable again, now let's see what happens. It's 5000 now, because Python inside this function used the global scopes variable, because we put global in front of it, which means I will use the global scopes variable. Okay, that's about scopes and global variables. Scope means where the variable lives, where the variable exists. You can access the variables, the scopes over your function. It's okay. We name it global scope. You can access global scope. but you cannot access the scopes which are below the level you are in. Okay, we will see lots of examples. We will do lots of functions to see the scope. You will understand deeply. For the time being, just know the term of scope and know how it works and the global keyword. I will stop here, and in the next video we will see the return. We will make our functions to return a value. Join me in the next video.